Social governance is a United Nations-inspired global scam to drive the world into sustainable development, aka technocracy, which of course means that they want to control all resources and kill capitalism and free market economics all at the same time. ESG is backed by the UN, the World Economic Forum, and major investment banks. ESG, or Environmental, Social, and Governance funds, are supposed to be those focused on companies with strong environmental ethics and responsibility. Now, just keep in mind, I believe the ESG score is essentially trickle-down social engineering. They want to label corporations with the equivalent of a social credit score, and they expect to push the messaging so much that people begin to adopt it. They expect people to review the scores and decide whether or not to shop there based upon their social agenda. It's widespread, too. They are beginning to label foods with carbon labels, hoping to mold behavior via guilt of carbon production. And just wait until they attach this model to a central bank digital currency, offering rewards or carbon credits based upon conscientious purchases. It is social engineering. It's a scam. And here's a few anecdotes regarding how much of a scam this really is. Further investigation reveals rampant greenwashing has occurred. And of course, many ESG-labeled funds are far from quote-unquote sustainable. The SEC is investigating Goldman Sachs over its ESG funds, including whether the bank's management of those funds differs from what it has disclosed to its investors. In May 2022, electric vehicle manufacturer Tesla was removed from the S&P 500 ESG index, and this is despite its focus on creating environmentally conscious vehicles. So Elon Musk tweeted in response that ESG is in fact a scam, considering ExxonMobil is still listed in the S&P 500 ESG Index Top 10. Well, if that's not an indicator that this is a scam, then I don't know what is. ESG is one tactic being used to push the quote-unquote green agenda forward, while the notion of a pollution-free world is an attractive one, and a notion that literally no one disagrees with. Well, ultimately, this is not about the environment though. It's all about creating a control system in which the world's resources are owned by the richest of the rich, while the rest of the population can be controlled through the allocation of those resources, including energy, as explained by an anonymous writer in Winter Oak, and I quote, "Under such an economic construct, asset-holding conglomerates can redirect the flow of global capital by aligning investments with the UN's SDGs, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, it's through configuring them as environmental, social, and corporate governance models that these new international markets can be built on the disaster and misery of potentially hundreds of millions of people reeling from the global economic collapse. Therefore, the war going on in the East offers a huge impetus for the governments pushing the reset to actively pursue energy independence, shape markets towards green and inclusive growth, and eventually move populations towards a cap-and-trade system, otherwise known as a carbon credit economy. They will centralize power in the hands of stakeholder capitalists under the benevolent guise of reinventing capitalism through fairer and greener means. They do this by using deceptive slogans like Build Back Better, without sacrificing the perpetual growth imperative of capitalism. The World Economic Forum also discusses ESG as part of its quote-unquote sustainable resource-based economic system, and I quote, "Digital finance refers to the integration of big data, artificial intelligence, mobile platforms, blockchain, and the Internet of Things in the provision of financial services. Sustainable finance refers to financial services integrating environmental, social, and governance criteria into their business or investment decisions. When combined, sustainable digital finance can take advantage of emerging technologies to analyze data, power investment decisions, and grow jobs in sectors supporting a transition to a low-carbon economy. But it is important to be aware of the downside of reliance on suspect labels like ESG, which could ultimately tie large parts of the global population, including small farmers, to a new form of data slavery. And I quote, "A global seal of approval based on fake science, fake economics of maximizing profits through extraction will create new data slavery for farmers. Instead of using their own heads and co-creating on the earth, they will be forced to buy big data. Instead of obeying the laws of Mother Earth, they will be forced to obey algorithms created by big tech and big agriculture." This week, tens of thousands of farmers have gathered all across the Netherlands to protest government policies which will reduce the number of livestock in the country up to a third. In a typical example of media weasel wording, Dutch farmers protest emissions targets, but this is a massive lie by omission. The government policy being protested is a €25 billion investment in, and I quote, reducing levels of nitrogen pollution. But it plans to achieve this by, among other things, paying some Dutch livestock farmers to relocate or exit the industry. In real terms, this ultimately means reducing the number of pigs, chickens, and cows by about 30%. That's what is being protested here. The deliberate shrinking of the farming sector, impacting the livelihood of thousands and thousands of farmers, and of course, in turn, affecting the food supply of literally hundreds of millions of people. While this scheme is allegedly about limiting nitrogen and ammonia emissions from urine and manure, it's not hard to see this in the broader context of the ongoing created food crisis. The Netherlands produces a massive food surplus and is one of the largest exporters of meat in the world, and is the largest in Europe. Reducing its output by a third could have huge implications for the global food supply, especially in Western Europe. Perhaps more troubling is how this could act as a precedent. This isn't the first quote-unquote pay farmers not to farm